Jonathan Jones joins the program to discuss some of the biggest news from Week 15, and not a lot of news bigger than what the heck is going on with the Detroit Lions, because the hits keep coming. We have a graphic here that we're going to show up on the screen that has a number of their injuries, but doesn't even include all of them. Because, as you see here, David Montgomery, MCL, Carlton Davis, broken jaw, Aleem McNeil, just yesterday with the torn ACL. Those were all just yesterday. Then Derek Barnes, Aiden Hutchinson, Alex Anzalone, Malcolm Rodriguez. Doesn't even have Marcus Davenport on there because it was so long ago. And hasn't come back, will not be back this season. This is, at some point, not the Lions anymore. Have we reached that point, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's like the ship of Theseus, right? Like, how many wooden planks on this ship reference. Do you replace before it ceases to be the ship of Theseus? Yeah. And I think, look, they have made it through with all of these injuries up to this point and made it a one-score game against a team that I think a lot of folks would say and argue is the best team in football. And the Buffalo Bills may even be your Super Bowl favorite and certainly the MVP frontrunner at quarterback. But the attrition continues, and as the season goes on, something that we don't ever really talk about when we get to the Super Bowl, when we get to the title games, it's always about, oh, these are the best teams in the NFL. Well, interestingly enough, a lot of times it was the healthiest team in football who winds up making it to the Super Bowl. Look at the LA Rams when they were making their run. They were always the healthiest team in football, right? And yeah, you can have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and that's going to be the great equalizer and the ultimate equalizer, but you have to have health on your side. Every single time the San Francisco 49ers have competed for a world championship, they've been healthy. And when they aren't healthy, they don't, and they don't even come close, right? And so that is what we're starting to see with the Detroit Lions, and I don't think it can hold up just because historically and recently in the NFL history, it does not hold up. I think it's too arduous a task for defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. And then you're going to say, at least the offense is there. At least the offensive line hasn't gotten banged up. At least they still have Jared Goff. And that's fine. But we just saw him pass for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns and no interceptions, and they still did not get the win. There's only so many fourth downs that you can go for. There's only so many times you can try an onside kick with a 6.5% recovery rate and not get it, which was a mind-blowing thing to do in that moment. You have to legitimately wonder if they can sort of hold up this duct tape team into late January or early February.
Scotch tape, not duct tape. I feel like duct tape is probably stronger material than Scotch tape at this point, Jonathan Jones.
It really has been. And I do just think that as much as this offense can win you games, it's like they do not have just some of the names and some of the players that they're forced to play at this point. They're not guys you want on an NFL football field, and that's how you give up 48 points in an NFL game. All right, let's go to another.
And Mike, here's the other thing. Like, before we move on, like, there's really no way for them to acquire other talent. Right? Yes. We're past the trade deadline. The guys who are out there on the street, they're out on the street for a reason. They've been eating good in the holiday season, and, they're not up to speed in your system. So they're going to go out there, yeah, right? Like, they're going to go out there and they're going to sign some guys this week because they literally have to sign bodies. And they're going to need 3 weeks to ramp them up before they're actually playing football, or else you're going to see them at the game after they play. They're going to be on the injury report, DNP hamstring. Just like we saw with DJ Humphries in the Kansas City Chiefs last week.
Yeah, you almost want your injuries like as early in the season as possible, survive them, and then get healthy all come playoff time. I always go back to the Bucs when Vita Vea had like a broken ankle, was out like most of the year. Comes back for the stretch run and like was almost better because at 375 pounds, those guys wear down, but he was fresh. So like, unfortunately with the timing of these, I do agree that if you're down Carlton Davis, Aleem McNeil, Aiden Hutchinson for a playoff game, you are no longer the Detroit Lions defense. You're a shell. You're probably your 3 most impactful players. You just can't overcome that at some point. All right, let's move to a team that's going to be searching for a head coach and a GM this offseason. The New York Jets. What's the latest on their search for both those positions and how Woody Johnson, the owner, will be factoring in?
Yeah, so they're going to get those searches really started up this week. They're going to start up interviews with candidates. We were able to report former Titans general manager John Robinson he's going to be interviewed. I know ESPN reported that Louis Riddick, ESPN employee, is going to be interviewed. There are some other names who are out there that we need to double and triple source before getting those confirmed. But the Jets are going to be starting those interviews with GMs and coaches who are not currently employed by other clubs. That's per NFL rules. I certainly believe that there are going to be a number of names that we all know who will be interviewed at the end of the season when the NFL rules allow it. Do I believe that they're going to interview a Brian Flores, a Mike Vrabel, a Matt Nagy at head coach? I do. Do I think they're going to interview an Ian Cunningham and a Mike Borgonzi at GM? I also do there, but they can't until their team's seasons, regular seasons are done, or at least until they get into the playoffs. So the Jets right now, this is going to be the first search that Woody Johnson has done since 2015, because when they went out and got Robert Saleh and got Joe Douglas, he was across the pond serving as the ambassador to the United Kingdom. Well, he's not going to be serving that post in this Donald Trump administration. And in fact, it doesn't seem like he's going to be serving any post in this administration. And so that means that Woody Johnson, who is considered to be one of the most meddlesome owners in the NFL, is going to be there any day that he wants to be, and not separated from an Atlantic Ocean away from those who are running his football program. That's something really important for potential candidates. They're all going to want to know, who's my boss and how often is he around? And he is going to be around a whole lot. And the last point that I would say, because the Jets know this, they're going to want someone who can speak to Woody Johnson, who is going to be able to manage up, if you will. And so they're not, I don't think, going to go after a first-time GM with really no experience with meddlesome owners. They're going to want someone who has some pelts on the wall, if you will, Kyle.
JJ, it's also important to point out, you listed a few of these names with Vrabel, Flores, and Nagy. When I think about a guy like Matt Nagy, I think about him going to a place where the fan base has assumed that their franchise was cursed. And what did he do? Turn the franchise around immediately, won Coach of the Year, put the Chicago Bears at the top of the NFC North, albeit for a very short amount of time. You're going to want somebody in the New York Jets building, to your point, that has the ability to speak to these high-powered people like Woody Johnson. He's been in Kansas City. He's been around the Hunt family. He's been around Andy Reid, who's football royalty. I feel like that would be a guy that would make sense. A player's coach, somebody that's won previously, somebody that does have that luxury of having a pretty deep playbook, a unique look at the offensive side of the football, and that's where the Jets need to get better.
Plus, if I'm kind of hearing you correctly here, JJ, it seems like you're saying that they may not get like the hot candidate, or they're not going to be necessarily in contention for the hot candidate out there.
Yeah, I appreciate the reading between the lines there. I will say that the Jets believe that this is going to be a coveted job. They're going to say, hey, we have a lot of young talent. You're going to be able to come in and figure out who your quarterback's going to be. This is a reset. If you win here, you're going to be a king. All of those things. And all that stuff is certainly true. But if you're, let's say, Ben Johnson, for example, and you are the top name on the market, and are you going to choose between Chicago and the Jets? I think you're going to probably go to Chicago, right? If you have options, will the Jets actually be your top pick? And so because of that, will they get the top candidate? Not entirely sure. But does that mean that the top candidate should go there, would be the best fit? Also, maybe no.
Do we think we ever get, this is kind of a little off topic, but do we ever get someone getting full head coach, GM control the way, and I always go back to like Mike Holmgren back in the day for the Seattle Seahawks. Like it used to be semi-common for a guy to, once he gets head coach, to also be GM if he had like an established name that was in demand enough. Do we ever see that coming back?
I don't think so, and it's a great question. Belichick has actually talked about this a little bit, how the way the game is today, you have to have a general manager, whether you call that person the GM or not, because of just the analytics. You got the salary cap, you have all the ways that you can acquire personnel, how large these coaching staffs are, how needy so many of these players are, how less they're in the building today than they were when Mike Holmgren was doing his thing. It is so difficult for one coach, even if you're the GOAT or you know, you've done it for a long time. Andy Reid, Kyle, you know this, how often does he defer to Brett Veach? Does he ultimately have final veto power and say, of course, we all know and understand that, but he has a robust personnel department and an entrenched general manager there. And if anyone in the league could do it, it's Andy Reid, and Andy Reid's not doing it.
Yeah, to your point, JJ, Rick Burkholder, trainer for the Kansas City Chiefs, head trainer. He's the guy that got Terrell Owens back in the playoffs to have that run in Philadelphia. He's a guy that Andy trusts. Brett Veach obviously trusts him. Dave Tobe, a guy that he trusts. Andy Heck, a head coach type that's in the offensive line room. Steve Spagnuolo. Surround yourself with a bunch of these football mobsters. Make them do their jobs, but also lean on them in times of trials and tribulation. You're going to be in a good spot.
All right, let's end with this. Onside kick yesterday in the Detroit Lions-Buffalo Bills game with well over 10 minutes remaining in this game. Down only 10 points, but obviously they had given up 38 already in that game, so they knew they had to score some points going forward. But with the new rules, it's far more anticlimactic because you have to declare, you have to point it out, and even if you get it, you can only try one more in the fourth quarter before you're forced to then kick it away because you're limited to only two in the entire game. So do we see the NFL and the competition committee revising this, reassessing this? Because I think every fan watched what happened there and said yesterday, this would have been way cooler if it was just a surprise onside kick. It would have been way more exciting to watch.
Yeah, so a few things here. First of all, we're absolutely going to see the onside kick coming back because right now you're at a recovery rate of 6.8%. Really curious decision by Dan Campbell to do what he did. With 12 minutes left, 3 timeouts, 4 clock stoppages, including the 2-minute warning, down 10 points. And also, if the thing that has a 94% chance of happening happens, like Mac Hollins recovering the kick and returning it a little bit, then you put yourself at a disadvantage. Very curious decision right there. But if you agreed with the decision, what I think we're ultimately going to see is the 5-yard run-up, where at least the kicking team is going to be able to get a little bit of a head start to potentially recover that kick. And we're going to see that move up to the 15, 18, 20% recovery rate range. Look, you're going to always have to declare it. Right, there's no more surprise onside kick because you line up the 10 dudes in the setup zone now. So that can't be an onside kick anymore. You're going to have to declare. There will be no more surprise. But this nonsense of, only in the fourth and you only get 2, do away with that. You're going to if you want to declare it in the first quarter, go ahead and do it. And if you want to have an 18% chance of getting it, you will. I think that those changes are going to take place in the offseason. I don't believe we're going to see a 4th and long alternative because that introduces DPI into the conversation, right? You need a 4th and 20 conversion. Just going to throw it up, let the wide receiver work through the corner and throw the flag, and now you get possession. That's not going to happen. The answer, Mike, to the onside kick problem is bringing back the old onside kick, and I think that's what ultimately is going to happen.
Mike, I tried to tell you, there's one of 2 things that Detroit Lions fans were going to be purchasing in the coming months. It's either tickets to the Super Bowl parade or pitchforks and torches. And last night was a pitchforks and torches night. In addition to that, when you kick an onside kick in that situation as the head coach of the Detroit Lions, you then go against everything, all that credit you've built up all year, talking about faith you have in the roster. That is a lack of faith decision. It speaks volumes about what's going on in that locker room.
I disagree. I kind of liked it. I thought your defense couldn't stop nosebleed. You've given up 38 points. 6%
Give them a chance to
low.
stop a nosebleed. You got a higher chance to stop them than you do the onside kick.
But
Mike.
you also don't have a lot of time. And that once you do that, you hope to hold them to a field goal, but they're already in field goal range, so they don't have to travel too far. From a time perspective, they kick a field goal there, then you're down 2 scores. You still have to get an onside kick at some point in time. But I do think they were not stopping the Bills and then didn't stop them after that. So I don't think it was as bad a decision as at first glance.
Yeah, it was a bad decision. Just going to strongly disagree with you there, but that's okay.